Growing up, you never imagined a career in this industry was possible. What was that turning point for you?
Oh, I think there's multiple turning points. I feel like, well, I grew up in Indonesia and then I moved to America, not ever thinking at all of what that would do to my life. Um, I don't think that film or entertainment industry was ever in my vision, or even in my rear view vision, right? Or in my peripherals. It wasn't something that I thought about at all. It didn't seem possible. And I grew up liking Jackie Chan. Obviously, my parents, my dad specifically, loved a lot of like Hong Kong films, and my parents loved the Chinese dramas, and watching Power Rangers, teaching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, those kinds of things that like brought up my desire to be a part of that world. But the
Mhm.
weirdest one that I remember consciously making like I could do that was two things. This was before I even got into close to getting into the industry. I was probably about, I want to say 18 or 19. One moment was I had learned how to like do flips and stuff like that. And I remember, don't judge me on this, I was watching High School Musical and I saw the dancers and stuff doing flips in the background. I was like, I could do that. Well, why don't they hire me for that? I that isn't that how that works? I just didn't know how any of it worked. And then I was like, nah, I'm Indonesian. Like that's not a thing. I haven't
Mhm.
seen anybody like me on screen, which is a big part of it, right? The ones you see is Jackie Chan, Jet Li, you see Chong Fa, but that's kind of all you saw. You saw Bruce Lee, but again, that was like, before. And I remember watching a Disney XD show. Again, I'm too old for this, but whatever. Leave me alone. At the time, I was like, I had TV on, whatever. And it was a show called Aaron Stone. And I remember the lead girl, her name was Tania Gunadi. And I go, that's an Indonesian name if I've ever heard of one. And of course, it turned out that she's a friend of mine and a great friend of mine, and she's awesome. But that was when I was like, is it possible for
Mhm.
somebody like me to be in this industry and to be on TV? Like it just seemed like so far away. And then college came around when I was a math major, because that's what you do. I wanted to teach math. I loved math. Math was the language that was universal for me. So when I came to America, that was like universal. So I wanted to teach math and I wanted to coach cheerleading. That was my plan. That was my plan all like after college. And then a friend of mine goes, hey, I want to do this thing, like be on TV. You want to join me? And we did some casting, like extras casting or whatever. And that was the catapult. That was the one that, I showed up and I was like, this isn't so far away.
Mhm.
Like, yes, I'm over here and those people are getting, they're like the lead actors, but I'm here. I just have to make my step that way. And that's kind of where it all started. And I realized I had a passion for performing, and as introverted as I was, I was also extroverted when it came time to put on a show. Um, so I guess they call it ambivert, but that was kind of where the possibility grew into like, or the thought became a possibility. And then it was just working the grind and realizing it wasn't as easy as going from here to there. Your path goes like this.
Mhm. Great answer. When you look at your career as a whole, who or what has had the biggest influence, either personally or professionally?
The reason why I'm struggling to answer this is because I find it something that I have to have internally
Mm.
versus external, um, I guess influence, because they all change. And in this business, from what I've learned, you know, I think it's a little bit tough to rely on the outside, because at a drop of a hat, that person can change, or this can change, or that job could go away. You could end up on the room floor. It all becomes that way. But I'd have to say my wife and my brother are the most consistent. So if it is an external source versus myself, outside of myself, externally, it would be my wife and my brother, and as of recent, my son. Um, but my brother has been my partner in all of this. Anytime we learned it all together. I brought him in, but then we learned together, and we always envisioned this ladder that we're both on, and no matter what, somebody's going to be a little up a rung of the ladder, and you just put a hand down to do this, and then you kind of help each other climb. If you've ever done like tandem climbing, that's what you kind of do. You root yourself, you allow the other person to climb, and then they root themselves and you climb. So that's kind of how I see our relationship. And it's rocky, obviously, because for the longest time we would go out for the same projects and it just didn't make sense. We didn't look like each other at all. And for my wife, she's been such a strong core, because she's outside of it completely, and she's seen me go through all of my changes and then asked me the questions that then help me to internalize and go, why am I doing that? Why am I feeling this way? Why was that such a problem? Or whatever it was, like, oh, is this the right project to take? And there's stuff where I feel pressured by everybody else to take a certain project, and she goes, why? Mm. And just one person questioning it versus having a yes man around you helps to introspect and take that step back. So I would say those two. And as of recent, again, my son, because everything is something he's going to see. Is it something he'll be proud of? Or whatever little thing that just kind of pops in my head, and this is for him now. It's no longer just for me.
As you've been incredibly open about your journey with your identity, can you talk a little bit about the struggles you faced immigrating to the US, and how there were times where you were losing that part of your culture, and how has that impacted the way that you've now approached your career?
Okay, so moving here I was like 9 or something like that. My brother and I, we didn't speak very much English at all. We knew from what TV had, whatever. And I think I don't think we ever like fully said it to each other, but we made a conscious decision. Like both of us clearly made this decision together, or, at the same time, that we were going to stop speaking our native tongue. We would stop speaking Indonesian so that we wouldn't have an accent when we spoke English, because we got made fun of it for so long. We were in ESL for a couple of years, and luckily English is a fairly easy language to learn if you're younger, but it has all these like different nuances. Like I said laboratory for the longest time because I learned English from Dexter's Laboratory, and it's spelled laboratory. It doesn't make sense that it's laboratory. But I digress. But that was something that my brother and I that we struggled with, and we actually ended up going to a very Asian, like, I guess elementary, middle school, especially high school. It's very like Filipino, Korean. I went to Cerritos, and like we're proud 562ers, and we love 562, and it's very Asian. But because I think it was so Asian that everybody didn't want to be Asian, we all wanted to be something else, and there was that colorist hierarchy as well, right? Being Southeast Asian, that was something else, that meant something else. So it was a little bit of a weird balance. I had a different growing up versus other people who were like, oh, I grew up in a very white neighborhood or whatever. That wasn't the case for me. Very Asian, but it was a diverse Asian, right? And that came with its own problems. And I'm in the camp of like, there's always going to be those problems no matter where you are. It's just how you learn to deal with it and what it does for you when you grow up, right? So Peter and I pushed away not only our native tongue, but our culture. We didn't want to bring our food. I got bullied for my food. I don't know if he did. But I wanted to have like the American meals, even though we were in Asian school. Like how ridiculous is that?
Mm.
that I wanted like this stupid sloppy Joe that was disgusting versus like my mom's bachang or like
Mhm.
lumpia, right? Like anyway, it, and we pushed away like watching anime, stuff like that. That was like inherently, I guess, not inherently Asian, but like, you know, comes from Asian
Yeah.
culture. And it wasn't until I was, older that I was realizing what I'd lost. And I think what really hit me on what I'd lost was when again, I'm very fortunate. There was a project in Indonesia, and I had done stuff here at that point when Indonesia kind of got wind of me, and they, were like, oh, he's an actor and he's in Hollywood, and he also is Indonesian. We don't have that. And I think one of it was that I was the first Power Ranger to ever like Indonesian to be Power Ranger, I guess. And my brother was second, which is kind
Yeah.
of weird. But then because of that, I started getting traction in Indonesia, and I got my first movie out there, movie offer. And it just so happened that they needed somebody who was Americanized but spoke Indo a little bit, and it was a little off. It literally was me, and they didn't even know it at the time. But it was a cowboy movie, and Cowboys, that was like my first entry into entertainment. My very first theater show, live show that I got paid for was at Knott's Berry Farm as a cowboy. Anyway, um, because I got that job, I went to Indonesia thinking, yeah, of course, this is easy. I'm Indonesian. This is easy. That's when I realized I don't know anything about the food. I don't know anything about the
Mm.
location. I was actually scared to go at first because of what I had been told by media of what Indonesia was like. I myself, an Indonesian who immigrated here, fell into the trap and realized like, oh my goodness, Indonesia is actually beautiful. What am I afraid of? We've been shown the raid, and that's all we know about Jakarta, right? Drugs, blood, and and all kinds of craziness, which is not the case at all.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful city. It has, of course, its drawbacks, but what city doesn't? I live in LA. It's like a little crazy, but I think when I went back and realized I didn't speak my language the way that I thought I couldn't read. And here's the sad part is that Indonesian it goes with like ABCs, right? Like we have the same what is that? Alphabet. So like why couldn't I read it? It's not like it was characters, right? Like if it was Mandarin or like Japanese, then I can understand why. But I was like, I can't read this, and it's like ABCs. I just don't understand it. Um, and that was when I was like, yo, I've been pushing away my culture for so long that I no longer belong to it. It no longer feels right to me. I was foreign. I was now foreign in two different worlds. I was foreign in Indonesia and foreign in America. So, but I think that's how a lot of immigrants feel, is that they don't belong in either world. And that's when I had to find myself and realize that not only do we belong in both worlds, we are the bridge of both worlds. This comes from like watching too much Avatar, but we're the bridge of the spirit world. And but anyway, I think that's how it's helped inform my identity, and also as an actor, like it broadens my spectrum
Yeah.
and broadens the opportunities that I'm allowed to have. You know, I have the ability to go back to Indonesia whenever there's a movie that wants me. Hey, hire me, guys. Um, to go back out there and to do something out there, which I love doing. COVID kind of screwed that up, but
Mhm.
hopefully it comes back up.
Beautifully said. And like we were talking about earlier, you were saying earlier that you didn't think a career in this industry was possible because you didn't see yourself on screen. What has it meant to you to know that you're paving the way so that future generations won't have to experience that same thing? And you've had so much success in your career. When you look back, is there a
Thank
moment
you.
that stands out to you?
I think the biggest one would be, I think Power Rangers will always be the biggest one, the catalyst, right? Because I've done other stuff before that, but and of course after that. And there's one that I'm really excited about coming up later on this year, which we'll talk about when that's out. But Power Rangers to me was one of the biggest ones, because I didn't realize I was the first Indonesian to become a Power Ranger, but I guess it makes sense because I hadn't seen one. But until it happened, nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about that there wasn't one, right? And it was just the weirdest thing to me. And what was cool about that character was that, I think Power Rangers, it gets a lot of flack for like, oh, you only have certain ethnicities for certain whatever, but they do a very good job of not having to explain themselves of why people are a certain ethnicity, right? My character was a caveman. They didn't go, oh, we found him in Asia. He was frozen in Asia. That's why he's Asian. They didn't need to do that. They were just like, he was frozen and now he's not. He's alive after however many thousands of years, right? And they don't have to explain my Asianness. And that was cool. And it wasn't like my guy was eating dumplings at all the whole time. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Asian stories, but sometimes it's beautiful when there's just an Asian character who's just Asian,
Yeah.
and is not considered and needs to be there to show his Asianness, his or her Asianness, right? I think that was one of the coolest parts for me. And this happened, in 2014, which, those kinds of conversations weren't really happening that much yet. So I think that helped wrap my head around that whole thing a little bit sooner. And the other thing was, I will say, because in 25 years or whatever of Power Rangers, they didn't have this character. Everybody spoke English fluently. There was a character who kind of didn't, it was like Tarzan, and then he ends up learning it fluently. My character did not speak English fluently. It wasn't that he had an accent because he was Asian. It was because he was a caveman and just didn't speak until he was, frozen, whatever, So he spoke like a child. He just learned. He was learning. He was copying, very much like how my son sounds now. And what was cool about it is that it upset me at first, because I was like, oh yeah, you got the Asian guy not speaking English fluently. Awesome. But the acting coach one was like, you can't hate your character. No matter how bad or whatever it is, even if they're a villain, you have to love your character, because otherwise you'll feel disconnected to this character. And I found a way to love it. And then after it started airing, every time I tell the story, it's the craziest thing. I got like a letter, because we would get like these letters from kids all around the world or whatever. And there was this kid from, I believe it was Brazil, and it moved to America. Doesn't speak English, obviously. Around the same age I moved when I was young. And he was saying how he got bullied a lot for not speaking English, like me. And then when our show came out, whenever they would play and hang out, they were like, you can be the Blue Ranger, because you can be Coda, which made me realize that there was another world that wasn't seen, like, especially for me. Not only did I not see Asian men who looked like me on screen and not be the butt end of the joke, right? But also like people who didn't speak English fluently shown in a beautiful spotlight, and I think that, to me, that will be the best moment for me, because that's when I realized it. It took a child for me to realize what I was missing from my childhood. So I thought that was really cool. And that's something that I've noticed, is that, growing up, I feel like a lot of Asian guys, mostly Asian guys, I think, went into martial arts, even if they didn't really care much for it, because all they saw were Asian, like anyone on TV who looked like them knew martial arts.
Yeah.
So we had to know it. It was like this weird, that's how you're masculine, right? You're not seeing any other ways, or you're the nerd, right?
Yeah.
Even I remember my first job, I did like a photo shoot for something, a couple different jobs, and they threw glasses on me, and I was like, I don't need glasses. And they're like, yeah, but this fits the look better. And I never thought about it until now. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, okay. Because all Asian guys need that or like have to have that look, you know. Anyway.
Mm. Why do you think it's taken the industry so long to get to this place where we're getting more inclusive stories and representation? And when did you notice that shift?
I can't speak for, I guess, the whole, but from what I see, I feel like it's having, okay, it's our new generation, right? Also of Asians. The ones, the rebellious Asians, the ones who don't want to just do what we're told, right? It took that because my mom didn't want me to do,
Mm.
this. In fact, I remember her crying to me about it when I brought my brother into it. So, and they love it now. They understand that I can take care of myself through doing this, that it is, I think what it is, a lot of it is that a lot of, Asian parents worry about their kids, right? Obviously, they're always worried that you're not eating enough, this and that, whatever. They're worried they're not going to be able to survive with this job, which I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but if we keep continually like doing what we're told, making sure we're the model minority or this like myth of the model minority and continuing to be I guess I hate this word, but like I guess sheep in a sense, but like following what others are telling us to do, then we'll never think for ourselves, right? And I think it took this generation of people who were willing to go out there, risk themselves, go out on a limb, and do what isn't conventional. And not only now do we have actors, we have people in front of the screen and people behind, and that's what it takes. People who are doing media, people who are uplifting, people who are writing. All of these different aspects are what is making this a reality and a possibility. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of it that we didn't have before. You could have like you could have like the best actor for the job, but if behind they're like, I don't like Asians, so we're not going to choose them. Nothing you can do about it because there's no Asians in the room to be like, whoa, hold on, dude. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, let's make this Asian character do this stupid little thing. And they're like, that works, right? Yeah, Asians do that, right? Yeah, all right, boom. And then the actor's like, I guess I have to. What do I do? Right. So it takes a certain, it's our generation,
Mhm.
and the generation that comes before us that paved the way, because there was, a few of them that did that. And whoever it was before that paved the way. It's the Asians who are breaking out of that conventional like mold.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of like assimilation that, being an immigrant, I know all about it because I tried to assimilate, but the assimilation that we all felt pressured to undergo, I think is what made it take so long.
Mm. You've got a new project coming out next week. Can you tell us about Bullet Train and your
Yeah.
character in the film?
Okay. So Bullet Train was such a fun project to do. It was our first one, my first one coming out of COVID. I guess it was like, was that, I want to say September of 2020. So we were all very wary, getting jabbed sometimes twice a day. But it was such a wonderful experience because I think before that, I actually hadn't done a project in LA, like in town, for a very, very long time. I was always out of town. I was always in Louisiana or, Canada, not Canada. I barely go to Canada, but like just out of town, right? Indonesia or whatever, always out of town. And this was my first one. And it was so great to me because it was around the time that my son was about to be born. Now, this was my character is the young version of one of the characters on the film, and it was supposed to be a very small character. I think it still is, it's an important piece of the movie, and it shows like why people are there and how they got there. But I was only in the flashback scenes. I played a younger version of which I'm a huge fan of, Hiroyuki Sanada, which such a huge fan of. And I've actually like been told that I look like a young version of him. So when I got that, I was like, absolutely 100% down. And I actually got it through the stunt coordinator who I'd worked with on a commercial a while back. And they were supposed to they're like, yeah, I'm gonna send your stuff to casting and this and that, and then nothing for 2 weeks. And I was like, I guess that's gone. And then wardrobe calls me and is like, hey, we need you to go in for a fitting for this character. And I was like, what am I doing? What project is this? I was so confused. But that's when I found out I booked it. And then it was kind of like I believe the script was getting changed here and there, and they were very tight with the script, so I didn't know much about my character. I just knew that I had to be the younger version of Hiroyuki Sanada, which I was like, okay, well, I think this character speaks Japanese. So they didn't fully give me a script. They gave me an idea of what was happening. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna ask a couple of my friends on how to say certain things within this scenario, and I'm gonna make sure I know what I'm doing on the day in case they make me say something. So I actually asked Mari Takahashi and Miki Ishikawa, and they actually sent me a bunch of voice recordings of how to say certain things, and that's what I went with. And I remember on the day that we were shooting this, I think I was only supposed to be there a couple of days. I wasn't sure, but on the first day, I remember it was a really cool scene, beautiful sets. We shot everything in studio, or at least for my stuff, and they had to make it look like Japan or Neo Japan, I believe, because I guess at that one it wasn't Neo Japan, but it because we couldn't go to Japan, we couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful, and I remember having to do the scene that was very emotional and very taxing, and there was no sound guy or anything like that, not that I've seen, and they didn't mic me up or anything like that. So I just did it. I did my thing, and then I think second take, I saw David Leitch, the director, go over to the sound guy. It's like, make sure you get him. So that's kind of how that happened, honestly. And then that's when they told me I got part of cast because of that. So it's kind of amazing. I know some friends who have seen it. I haven't seen it. I'm fully expecting to not be in the film at all because it's better to expect the least and then get more. But we'll see what gets put in, because it ended up being the stuff that I shot. There was a lot that we shot, and I'm really excited to see the movie. I know some friends have seen it and they said that it was really good, but they haven't told me how much of me you actually see.
What's that process like when you're working, when you're sharing a character with another actor? Is that process different?
So I asked, we saw each other passing by set all the time. I was hanging out with Andrew Koji most of the time. He's super cool, awesome dude, very talented. If you're not watching Warrior, go watch Warrior. Plug there for a Warrior. But I remember passing by Hiroyuki, and I asked, I was like, sorry, Sanada-san, do you mind if I chat with you for a little bit? I'm playing, your younger self. And he's like, oh, great. And I spoke to him a little bit in Japanese. I'd been practicing a little bit of Japanese, so I could introduce myself or whatever, and I kind of asked him how he felt about certain things and how his character was. I know that we had to share something where it happens to me and then it becomes a part of his character.
Yeah.
So it was how do you want that to happen? And so we had a chat, and then the coolest part was 2 days after we shot the big scene for me, I guess everybody had seen it. They had edited it because they liked it. They edited the whole thing and then they sent it off, and they were showing everybody but me. I haven't seen it still. But the director was like, great job. And then the others were like, great job. It looked so good. And I was like, can I see this? But then Sanada-san comes up to me and he was like, really good job. I saw the scene, like he was like, really good job. And I was like, cool. That, validates me. I'm happy because, you don't want to step on his toes because this is, predominantly his character. So I wanted to make sure that he was happy with what I was doing, but he was so like, do whatever you need to, I'll make it work because, my scenes were shot first for a lot of that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So he was like, I'll make it work. But, I just didn't want to, I wanted to, I wanted to give him as much of that character
yeah,
as he
to play
wanted.
with. Yeah,
Yeah. Especially because you're gonna see my stuff in between his stuff.
yeah.
I think depending on how it's edited, but that was really cool. And he was such a cool dude for like, being willing to like take time in between his scenes to like work that stuff out. So it was really cool.
I got one final question for you. You were talking about that
Yeah.
emotional scene that you filmed. As an actor, how do you create the space for yourself to dive into those kind of more emotional arcs?
I think it depends every time on what it is. For this one particularly, it was very easy because sometimes it happens so like easily because it's so parallel to your world,
Mm.
right? It was a scene with my wife and child. I had just had a child. My wife is at home, so it was like easy to replace those faces with those faces. But yeah, it's I think it has to be different every time. And the problem is with, like, not the problem, but like the way it works with film is that you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again, and you just have to find that place quickly, because sometimes you don't get, all right, go take your 5 minutes to listen to music to kind of get you there or whatever. You kind of need a trigger. So sometimes the trigger is just closing your eyes really quick or whatever it may be, but you need to find that trigger, whatever it is, for themselves. Like for me, for that moment, luckily, I couldn't keep my phone on me, so I couldn't have a photo of them with me, but it was just like imagining that in my head. And I'm very lucky to be able to just imagine that in my head right away. But that was the connection that I made, and it was just very lucky that it was such a parallel.